Okay, so this is a controller repair tutorial. Basic, like refurbishing. You bought a controller, you want to make it better. It's not quite up to standards. That's what we're going to do. This is a Super Famicom controller. It is the exact same thing as a Super Nintendo controller. The only difference is these buttons. It doesn't have the purple buttons, it has the colored buttons, and it doesn't have the mix of convex and concave buttons that the Super Nintendo has. These are all the same, and these are the kind of controllers I like because the flat surfaces of the buttons are easier as opposed to them being different. It makes some kind of moves hard once you get into it. But this is a basic controller. I just bought it on eBay and it arrived today, so I'm gonna take it apart and see what's on the inside. On the back of the SNES controller are 5 little screws. You don't need anything to help you with this besides a tiny little screwdriver. To clean the circuit board, we're gonna use Q-tips and isopropyl alcohol, which is just 91% alcohol. You can buy it at like any store. No, also the person I buy controllers from, most of them are pretty clean. If you have any questions, by the way, feel free to ask. So we're gonna take out 5 little screws, just tiny little screwdriver. No real special equipment needed. So like they may need to be refurbished a little, but you don't need you won't be grossed out by the controllers. Okay, I will say where I get the rubbers, don't worry, and I'm also gonna post the link in the description for the rubbers that I prefer. But there's multiple kinds of rubbers, so you can buy new rubbers, but they're not always better. There's some OG Nintendo rubbers still floating around in controllers that are very, very good. So you kind of learn to look at rubbers. Today I'll be replacing rubbers though, because I do have rubbers that I bought that I like and I'll be replacing with. There we go. Loosen all 5. They're loose. There we go. Top is off. So I like to take the top with the 5 screws still in it and just place it to the side, because we won't need that until everything is done and put together. Oh, we can't ooh, that's not good at all. You'll occasionally run into this stuff. This shoulder button is broken. Ooh, that's not good. Okay, so this shoulder button was broken. It's off at the pivot. So let me see something real quick. Might have to take a detour. Let me see. That's not good at all. I am going to temporarily pull a shoulder button out of this for the sake of the tutorial. Okay, so I have a bunch of these lying around. We're gonna take apart this one and steal a shoulder button from it. Normally they're not broken, but I mean, you're dealing with old SNES controllers, so that's the thing you got to remember, is that there are no new SNES controllers at all. They were all originally made like when Nintendo made them, so you're gonna deal with 20-year-old equipment breaking occasionally. Okay, but this controller is basically just a spare. It doesn't work quite as well as some of the other ones, so it's been sitting in the drawer. So let's repurpose it to be a little better. We are gonna need those shoulder buttons after all. Sorry, these screws are in just a little tight. There's no reason to make these screws that tight. Whenever you're working on this, you just need to make sure they're snug. maybe about the same. A 3D print. See, the issue is with modern controllers, it's not about like the print. It's not about like, oh, they didn't quite get the feel right. It's more about the buttons. They, for some reason, lots of modern companies really struggle with recreating like just simple buttons that last a while. I don't know why. Man, the problem with this screw is it's a little rusty. I wonder. I can show y'all this. This isn't so much a SNES trick as a life trick. If you ever have a screw that is stripped out, as in you're having a hard time turning it and it's slipping, get a rubber band, put your screwdriver in the rubber band like so, and then put it in, and then it starts gripping again. You can use that for anything. Is it out yet? Ah, almost. Okay. Yep. This one's just rusted though. Probably part of the reason why I wasn't using it. There we go. Yep. Do I want to know why screws strip so easily? I do. Are they made? Is it made of like a different type of metal? There we go. We're gonna momentarily take this bad boy out. We just did that. I will put this all together later. That can be an off tutorial thing. We'll put it over there. Now, this is the controller we were working on today. Now with a proper shoulder button. Because there's something called JIS screws and stuff. Standard Industry Phillips. Oh, it's like a Japanese standard. Okay. Huh? There we go. Now we got... This is the controller. Now, what we're looking at right now is the back of the circuit board. And for the record, if you need SNES screws, you can buy new screws for the SNES controller. But we are going to do a couple things. One, we're going to take off the circuit board. So this is the circuit board right here. If you see the black spots, that is where the buttons contact. So the ones on this side are the D-pad, and the ones on this side are the buttons. And these ones up top, they're like separate little things. These are for the shoulder buttons. Yo, I got you, Spud. Just hit me up and I will send you one. I don't mind it. If both of these are good, I'll just send you one of these. Yo, Greg, thank you for the tier 3 sub, my dude. 11 months. Jesus, thank you. So anyway, we look at this and it's a little too much to go to in depth, but so the buttons and the controller, once you've been around SNES controllers a while, you kind of know what to look like. This, by the way, is not white. It's a pale green. There's just a chroma key on my key. But both of these are pretty average kind of pads. They're nothing particular that you want to look for. Sometimes there are white OEM pads for D-pads that work really well, but it doesn't look like we have either of these. So now we're at the cleaning process. We're going to put these to a side. I have a bag full of just all the extra D-pads and butt rubbers that I don't use. So now we are going to do this. We are going to see how much this one needs cleaning. Looking at it, a perfectly clean circuit board, when you look at the black, will have like, it'll be smooth. It'll be like a smooth matte kind of look. If it needs to be cleaned, it looks kind of like scuffed up. And what a lot of that is residual residue from the back of the pads. So like the contacts, you see how there's black that's like a different material, and when it touches the circuit board over a long period of time, it eventually like rubs off on it. So what we are going to do is we are going to take Q-tips, yet another really simple items, and we are going to dip it in the isopropyl alcohol. So just quick dip. Don't need it to be soaking wet. Squeeze off a little bit of the extra, and then we're gonna take it and then clean it. We're gonna rub just the black pads. You don't need to clean anything else, unless of course it's filthy. If your board's filthy, just clean it all. But we're gonna rub. So this is the D-pad part. See, and I could tell just by looking at this one, if you can already see see the black on this Q-tip, that's how much is coming off when we clean this. Now, I did one controller earlier today and almost nothing came off on it. It's 91%. So isopropyl alcohol is like the alcohol you use to treat wounds. It's antiseptic alcohol. So like to buy this alcohol, you would be in like the health department, the health part of your store, because that's what that is. This is kind of alcohol you put on wounds, but you use it because it'll evaporate off it and not contaminate your electronics. So let's this one, I'm glad this is the one we chose, because this one is clearly going to need a deep, thorough cleaning. It doesn't look like it. Like the controller itself is pretty clean. There's no Cheeto dust, but the buttons themselves are a little rough. So dip our little Q-tip in some more isopropyl alcohol, squeeze it off. It doesn't need to be like soaking wet, and then just get a good scrub. It looks like the D-pads are really dirty, so we want to try and clean that off. Start and selects don't need to be too bad, but you might as well clean them because you're here, you know? But lots of games, you don't need like exact inputs on your start buttons or select buttons, just because they're not, you don't use them for gameplay purposes. Okay, and then we'll get the other side. The faster it dries and thus the safer it is with electronics. Exactly. So the fact that it like if you already look what I just touched, it's already off the board, it's already evaporated. That's why we can like keep scrubbing and keep cleaning as quickly as we do. We don't have to like wait for it to dry or dry it off ourselves or anything like that, which is very helpful. So we trying to scrub a dub enough. Now, not all games use the shoulder buttons, but when they do, they really do. Shoulder buttons are an overlooked part of your SNES controller, just purely because so many games don't use them. You don't even realize your shoulders are bad until you hit a game where it's time to use them and all of a sudden they're not working. So we do try and make sure we clean those. So let's keep scrubbing. Right now, it looks like the D-pads are giving us the most off, or like the most is coming off when we rub our D-pads. Now you're not like putting elbow grease into this, but you are pushing down a little bit. Oof. Dirty. But you can already tell, so as you're cleaning them, you'll notice like I said before, they're like, oh, they look kind of scuffed up the way like a shoe might look scuffed up. But the more you clean them, the more you see that scuffs start to go away. And that's how you know you're making progress in cleaning them. They're looking a little more matte, a little more flush, and gives you a really good idea that they are good to be cleaned. I'm excited about a controller I did earlier, because whenever I did this with a controller I did earlier today, basically nothing came off. They like weren't black at all. So that means it was pretty good. The reason you want these clean, just in case anybody doesn't realize, is because this is what your buttons contact. And when there's residue on there, the buttons don't contact as cleanly. Meaning sometimes you push it down and it either takes extra strength and weight down to push them, or you just don't get the contact right away, or they let up early. Lots of things can happen. So we want these as clean as possible. Keep cleaning. This one required a lot, but that is good. Now, for the rubbers that we are going to use, I am going to use rubbers that I bought. So I bought these from a supplier and they have treated me very well. Let me get like one more set of scrubbing done. And these shoulder blades, they're messy. Especially want that right one. The right one's the one I use more. Okay. Every other one, a good wipe down. On a lot of these, you're not necessarily going to be able to go until it's black. Just make sure you can kind of visually tell. Okay. And then let's hit these buttons one more time. There we go. Okay. Start and select buttons are always dirty. Okay, so that is going to do it for the circuit board part of it. Now we're moving on to the rubber pads. For anybody who doesn't know, SNES controllers and even all modern controllers have rubber buttons. They're rubber membranes that push a contact into the board. And basically that contact being completed is what sends it to the board. Now, the one that I use, and I'll give you all the description for this, sells two types of rubbers. It sells a black set of rubbers for the buttons and the D-pad, and it sells a white set of rubbers. Now, the black set of rubbers are stiffer than the white set of rubbers, which is both good and bad. They're easier to push in, which means if you play with them for a long time, it won't wear your hand down as much. However, I found that over the white ones on the D-pad, because they're so flexible, they give you accidental diagonals a lot. I.e., if you just want to hold down, it'll hold down and right. Or you just want to hold right and it'll hold down. And that can hurt you in a lot of games. So I like to use, and this is just me personally, the black ones for the D-pad and then the white ones for the button. Because you don't need to worry about crossover for buttons the way you do for D-pads. Because D-pads are all one, they're all one object. If you pull out the D-pad like this, it's all one thing. Whereas the buttons are four separate, so you don't need to worry about overlap. Yeah, the black ones can definitely cause fatigue if you play with a while. So I like to use the black one on the D-pad and the white ones on the buttons. Now that makes it a little bit stiffer and they feel like the buttons are easier to press in than the D-pad. If this is something that like throws you off when you're playing, you may want to make sure you put in both. But you can kind of use both interchangeably, and these are not the only rubbers. These are just ones that have personally worked really well for me in the past. Okay, so we have rubbers. I'm going to leave the shoulder buttons in. Shoulder buttons, the shoulder button rubbers, which are right here, they look like this. They're like tiny. Shoulder button rubbers are very finicky. There's not like one good place for rubbers. So you gotta have to like play around with them, see if they work. They're a little weird is all I'll say. I don't have one good like, yes, this is what I use for shoulder rubbers. So I kind of just, once I find ones that work, I stick with them for a bit. So we are going to put the board back in. It fits back in. There's just little holes that like guide it into place really easily, so you don't even need to worry. You've not found super great ones yet. I found one place that seemed like they worked. I can send you a link if I can find it again. Put the little controller in its little like slots, and now we are going to attach the back again. Make sure everything's in place. Make sure the shoulder circuit boards are where they need to be, and then lay it down. Okay. Put everything back in. Those are the ones I use. They're from a place called Japan Spell. Those are what I use for the overall pads. Oh, why are you not closing? It's not closing down for a reason. I think the cable is in the way. Take it out. Okay. It is. Okay. It's pushed out a little bit too much. There we go. So there's no quick surefire way to do this, but that is the basics of it. The what it really comes down to is identifying a good circuit board, because sometimes circuit boards have just been bad. They're 20 years old. They don't contact as well. But identifying a good circuit board, you do that through playing with it. But then cleaning the circuit board and making sure you get rubbers that are nice and that you like. So like the ones that I use can be a little stiff. If you don't like them being stiff, then you'll have to go with a different style. But I found that the ones that I have provide the best mix of a pure contact, as in you'll always get the input that you want, without really hurting your hands if you play with it a lot. Yeah, and rubbers are very cheap, so there's not a big downside to trying a bunch. I think to buy like 6 sets of them, like 6 controller sets of them, is like $12. It's not too bad. These D-pads, we're gonna have to see. They go in a lot. Just make sure they're all a little snug. And there you go. I hope this has been helpful for you. We're gonna go test some of these controllers out now. Thank you for sticking around.